isn't. I mean, you have some humor, but it's more like character-based humor.
Yeah,
just characters kind of talking without like
Duncan,
Marvel one-liner things.
Duncan kind of like, mixes it up a little. He's got some jokes because he's Jason Momoa.
It's the character, and it's never pushed too far. It feels very natural.
My man.
Ride's not over yet.
Yeah. Even he was like more subdued. Who played Baron Harkonnen in the Lynch one? Kevin McMillan?
I don't know the actor's name, but
Holy God!
I loved the presentation of Baron von Fartbag in the David Lynch one. It's pushed so far to the extreme. It's so grotesque.
Every scene.
The first time we see him, he's got these like pustules on his face, and they're like sucking out the pus. I can't remember what the scene is, but there's like, if you were to take a scene in the Lynch one, it's like 20, 30 seconds out of context and just look at it on its own. It's when Paul Smith is his like assistant guy.
Yeah, Bluto from the Popeye movie.
From Popeye. When he walks in and there's an upside down cow and he rips out its tongue and starts chewing it, and then we cut to the Baron just spinning in a circle. Yeah. If you just look at that clip with no context.
With Jack Nance, like, has some like dial that he's like, it looks like some old 1950s sci-fi, contraption.
Those 30 seconds are what they call pure cinema.
But the cow thing is upside down, and then there's like a dwarf like electrocuting it with like a taser or something. It's just, what is happening?
I wanted to mention that there's a lot of animal stuff in the David Lynch one, because there's also the cat.
I'd forgotten about this, and I don't know how I forgot about it because it's so memorable. Sting is like carrying around a hairless cat or something?
It's a really short hair cat. I don't think it's completely hairless.
It's in this like harness. It's kind of hanging from this thing, and then there's a rat tied to it as well.
Just tied to it, yeah.
So they've kidnapped it's like the house mentat of the Atreides house, Thufir. Mm-hmm. They've kidnapped him and poisoned him, and so he has to milk the cat every day and drink its milk if he wants to live.
To kind of counteract the poison, and it's never brought up again?
Never brought up again.
By milking this smooth little cat's body, you receive your antidote.
And I don't even think you see that character again, Thufir, until, I don't know, maybe the end? I don't think he says anything.
Yeah, so there's the cow, and then there's the pug. Patrick Stewart goes into battle with the pug.
There's a scene in the Emperor's Palace at the beginning where somebody is walking about like 7 or 8 bulldogs. Mm-hmm. And then the House Atreides has all the pugs. So I guess it was like a sign of, I know those types of dogs were famous with like royalty, would always have these dogs. So maybe it was like a little nod.
I got a little thought put into that, if that's the case.
Yeah, but I just love the fact that Patrick Stewart at the end is running into battle with this pug screaming. It's like a famous screen grab.
Yeah. I did hope if you were, I knew there was not going to be any nods to the Lynch version in the new one, but there was a moment when I was hoping when they're in their like dragonfly ships.
The ornithopters.
And they're flying over the spice harvester. Mm-hmm. I was like, if they cut to David Lynch in that spice harvester.
We are coming down to take your harvester. All spotters are ordered to comply.
Ordered by whom?
Reprising his cameo from the original movie.
It would be Denis Villeneuve.
No, have it be David Lynch playing the same character. That would have made my day, but I knew that wasn't going to happen.
Unloading the spice.
But that's another sequence where it's like, if you look at them side by side, it's almost the exact same sequence. I'm assuming it's all directly from the book.
I think from a certain point on, the movies kind of sync up in like, plot beats. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of diverge, I think, once they kind of meet the Fremen. And then the Lynch one just goes off the rails. But yeah, they're kind of
we don't have that part of the story from the new one yet, so.
Which is very weird. I'm kind of wondering because, unless you're familiar with the story or know a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff on the Denis Villeneuve one, I don't think the average Joe would even know this is just a part 1 because they don't advertise it as that.
No, in the actual movie at the beginning, it does say Dune Part 1.
For half a second.
It's very brief.
It is so fast.
And it's different than like, well, first of all, it's weird that they made it without even knowing if they were going to be able to make the second one.
Which is mind-boggling.
That's a crazy choice. But I'm not familiar with the Dune story outside of the David Lynch movie. Going into the new one, that was all I knew. And it doesn't really have, even though it is a part one, it doesn't really have any sort of conclusion. Not that it needs a
Yeah.
solid, but I compare it to like the Lord of the Rings, like the
sure.
Fellowship of the Rings.
They kind of felt like individual movies.
Yeah, there's a larger story going on, but it still feels like a satisfying movie. And this one really doesn't.
It ends very abruptly.
Yeah, even down to the last shot. When I first watched it with some friends, because it's just them walking away from the camera. And it's like, at the very least, cut to like a massive wide shot showing them all walking in the bottom of the frame. Or it's just like everyone's just walking away, and they're like, I guess we're
or maybe
done.
like, cut back to like Baron Harkonnen or something like that. Like
yeah.
hinting at what's going to come next or, whatever. But yeah, I can see a lot of people, if somebody was saying like, a lady in the theater yelled out like, is that it? Like she had no idea that it was just a part one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like not on the poster, so to the average Joe, this would seem very kind of incomplete, I think. So it's kind of hard to judge as a movie. I think the experience was amazing, but
yeah. Knowing that the second part is coming, it'll be less of a complaint when they're both out, of course.
For sure, yeah. And I think you can't kind of take one without the other. The other end of the spectrum is say like The Matrix Reloaded, which was like completely out of left field. Like,
that literally ends with a dun dun dun.
dun. To be continued.
I couldn't believe it.
I was so angry, and everyone in the theater was, what the fuck?
Most of the people in my theater had fallen asleep by that point, so they didn't even notice.
I can see like fans of the novel being more satisfied. Some complaints are that, some favorite characters kind of get shortchanged, like Josh Brolin or Dr. Yue or whatever. But, we may see them.
It's an adaptation. It's okay to change things.
You gotta cut.
Add a cat that you gotta milk if you want. Just add more weird shit. Or cut back on the weird shit and streamline the story.
I wonder if that was like the attraction for Lynch. It's like, oh yeah, the Baron Harkonnen scenes are gonna be fucking amazing.
When I read the novel, the first thing I thought of was a cat in a cage that you have to milk. And that was his impetus to do the whole movie.
For
that
sure,
would not surprise me.
Who cares about the other shit? The Harkonnens. Brad Dourif in there. He's like such a creep. I love him. Yeah, all those scenes were just so wonderful.
You can tell that David Lynch's heart is really more in
that stuff.
The Darkonnens?
Harkonnens.
Harkonnens.
Yeah.
More interested in the creepy, weird, disgusting stuff.
Wasn't like some of his assistants had like their ears stitched up and then their eyes, and then they had these like little tubes poking at their eyeballs. It was just like, oh God.
And that's the thing is like, on all measurable levels, I think the new Dune is a much, much better movie.
Yeah,
but that also kind of makes it a less interesting movie to me than the weird shit that's in the Lynch movie.
For sure. It's like the same way like Jodorowsky's Dune. It sounded insane. I don't know whether it would be a very good adaptation of the novel.
I think, and I know when that documentary came out, people were like, oh, we were robbed of this amazing sci-fi masterpiece. That movie would have been a fucking disaster.
Oh my God,
If it was actually made, it would be a gigantic mess.
The castle opened the mouth, the spaceship came in the tongue.
And I like Jodorowsky, but...
he's very charismatic.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those documentaries where you just want to hear him talk. And as an adaptation of the novel, it would have been
I think even just as a
like
movie, it would have been...
Oh yeah, just like fucking crazy. Nobody would have seen that.
Yeah.
But I would like to have seen that movie made, just because.
Well, sure.
Just as an oddity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like the Lynch one is an oddity now, because it's kind of notoriously a giant flop, and there's so many odd choices in it, which makes it interesting.
It's fine. It's almost like a comfort movie for me because I grew up watching it, and I watched it many, many times before I even read the novel, so I didn't have any idea of like the hate towards it, or there was nothing to complain about as far as the story went because I didn't know the story of Dune and blah blah blah. But it was kind of clear when it ends, though, when he makes Paul an actual god. That was not what was in the novel at all. It's like the opposite of what.
Well, I wanted
Frank
to ask you about that, because one of the kind of complaints about the Dune story, and especially with it being the new adaptation, people are like, oh, it's another The Chosen One story.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my thought when watching the Lynch movie, where it's like, because the Chosen One kind of archetype is so, it kind of robs the character of agency and kind of
For sure.
lessens the stakes, because it's like, oh, they're destined to do this. It's just not interesting. What I did not know, and what you told me, is that that's not really the case in the books.
It's the opposite of that. So the book was kind of like Frank Herbert's warning to people about blindly putting their faith behind just charismatic leaders, and claiming them as like messiahs. And the whole point of the book was that Paul's not a messiah. He just has this gift of foresight. He can see the future. And that the Bene Gesserit have actually planted these stories across the universe of the prophecy, and they were meant to, create the Kwisatz Haderach through manipulating bloodlines. But Lady Jessica kind of defied them and gave birth to Paul, so he kind of arrived on the scene a generation earlier and kind of fucked up their plans. And then in subsequent books, I think like the Fremen hate him, and he survives multiple assassination attempts. They launch a holy war, which they get flash forwards of in the Denis Villeneuve movie of him, Paul kind of flipping around and stabbing people. Yeah, it results in 60 billion deaths across the universe. Ends with him being blinded and thrown into the desert to spend the rest of his days. But yeah, it's sort of the opposite of that. So if you kind of look at it, and I think Denis Villeneuve obviously knows that.
These people have waited for centuries for the Lisan al-Gaib. They see you, they see the signs.
There's kind of hints of it in the Villeneuve movie where...
Well, in rewatching it after knowing that, there was a couple bits that I noticed, yeah.
He was talking to a Fremen, and I can't remember who it was, but he was like, you've heard the stories of the prophecy. But he kind of looks at his mom like, check, watch this.
Yeah. Well, even at the very end, there's when everyone's walking away, and Zendaya's character, Chani, she turns around your story's just beginning, or this is just starting, or whatever. And they start walking away, and it holds on Rebecca Ferguson as Jessica for just a moment, where she has this apprehensive look on her face.
She kind of knows what's going to happen, and you can see her trying to get him off the planet. We've got to run.
Yeah, and they're trying to, and they're like, no, come with us, or whatever.
And he's like, no, my future is in the desert, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I think she knows what's going to happen.
So yeah, watching it with that knowledge kind of made it more interesting to me than stuff I wouldn't have even picked up on otherwise.
There's just a little scene, when he's sort of using the prophecy to sort of take advantage of people, and I think Denis Villeneuve is very aware of that.
Yeah.
So I hope he kind of goes with that in the second one, so it's not just a sort of straight ahead you're a messiah and a god. And
I think it's I don't think I've ever seen Timothée Chalamet in anything before.
No, neither have I.
I don't think I've seen any movies he's been in. But with that knowledge and watching him in this movie, it actually made me appreciate his performance more than the first time I saw it.
Right.
Because there is that slight bit of arrogance,
Yep.
but he's also kind of charming. It's oh, okay, they cast that really well. Kyle MacLachlan, I love him, but in the original movie, he kind of feels like he doesn't know what's happening.
I feel
he
like
feels disconnected from the material.
He feels very aloof.
Yeah.
And kind of a little arrogant and pompous. But I think everybody in the Lynch version was very dry and I don't know, kind of mannered in the way they speak and stuff like that.
It's a nice counterbalance to just how broad and weird everything is in that one.
Yeah.
That kind of evens it out a bit.
For sure. So it's not too, and then you get to Baron Harkonnen flying around, spitting in people's faces. He's taking showers in black goo.
Yeah.
I want you to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze.
Looks like they all just want to fuck one another. When Sting comes out.
Well, he comes out in his little gold bikini thing.
He looks like some Flash Gordon or codpiece or something, and then Baron Harkonnen's and you cut to Paul Smith, everyone's really sweaty. It's there's gonna be some sweaty incest orgy.
Yeah, there's something weird going on there. And then the Villeneuve version, it's just very like oppressive feeling. All those scenes with those characters.
Feels more menacing, I think, Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why they kind of didn't make him as like disgusting as the Lynch version, but I kind of like the Lynch version more.
I know, yeah, I know what you mean.
But
it wouldn't fit the tone.
It wouldn't fit the tone, but Stellan Skarsgård does a great job. He's intimidating.
Stellar skateboard.
Stellar skateboard.
Paul F. Tompkins joke.
I don't think either versions explain why he can float around.
I think he's just so fat, and I don't think he's got like some device in the Villeneuve version that kind of attaches to his spine. He's just such a big fat blob that it's just supposed to help him walk.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think either one really explains that.
No.
Unless I missed a line somewhere.
You kind of get it. He's like fat, and it's like the fat people scooter. What do they call those things?
The
Rascal.
Rascals. Yeah.
It's the space rascal.
Comparing the scores to the movie, again,
Very different.
one very eccentric choice, one, I guess I'd say safe choice. It's a good score to the new movie.
It's kind of like a typical Hans Zimmer. It's very kind of percussive. I don't remember any themes or anything.
No, that's the thing, is like the Toto theme is very memorable. It's very like, I don't know.
I feel like that's something I would play, like if I'm working or something. I would listen to the Toto song, especially the end credit music.
Well, maybe not that song.
It's like smooth rock. Whereas like the Hans Zimmer, yeah, you wouldn't put that on in the background.
No, I mean, it's effective, but it's never particularly memorable.
It's very bombastic.
Yeah,
especially in IMAX. Oh my God, that was just killing me. There were some points where I felt it was just too much. It was
Really?
Well, I think it was when Jason Momoa was escaping. He gets in that ornithopter and he's flying around. It's just like, take your foot off the gas a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
And then they go into like that kind of like. I thought
There is the Harkonnens in one of the scenes. They have like a throat singer.
Oh,
where he's
really?
doing like that, and that's like a nice touch as
That's
they're
pretty
putting
cool.
blood on everybody's forehead.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like all that stuff feels like, they're getting ready for battle. This is creepy.
That was a good casting choice with, was it Polka Dot Man?
It's
Captain
Polka Dot Man,
Yeah, I
yeah.
loved him. That was Brad Dourif's character in the first
Yeah.
movie. It was a good choice.
Well, that role wasn't really played by Brad Dourif. It's played by Brad Dourif's eyebrows. Brad Dourif is just kind of there too. I will say, even though some of the compositing isn't great, those scenes in the Lynch version where they're wandering through the desert,
yeah.
they make that environment look a lot scarier and more kind of treacherous than in the Villeneuve version. The Villeneuve version, it just looks like a desert. But there's like all these jagged rocks and stuff in the David Lynch version.
Okay.
If anything, felt like it was a little too long or maybe slightly tedious in the Villeneuve version. It's some of the stuff with them in the desert when it's just Paul and Jessica.
I think it kind of dips down like energy-wise because, you just had this big battle.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of like aftermath.
Well, that again goes with the idea of splitting it into two movies. That kind of throws you off, where it's, there's a big battle, and then it goes on for quite a bit after that.
It's a weird
Paul fights one guy at one point, and then it just kind of ends.
Yeah, it's a weird structure, I guess, because you're trying to adapt one story with kind of like, a 3-act structure, and then kind of cutting it in half and trying to make a movie of it, which usually they have very specific structures. So yeah.
But again, once the second movie's out,
For sure.
that'll alleviate all that,
yeah,
assuming the second one turns out good, which I would
I'm
imagine it
sure
will.
This is only the beginning.
I don't want to give the impression we've been talking about somewhat favorably about the David Lynch version.
Oh, yeah.
A notorious flop that I think a lot of people just consider to be just a flat-out bad movie.
No.
I think it's a victim of bad editing and rushing through the story.
The studio mandate, I think.
Yeah.
If David Lynch got a chance, at least, to kind of make a better version, who knows if it would be a good movie, but it would be much better than I think what it is.
Yeah, I was just surprised that, with all its flaws, that it was still as good as it was.
Yeah.
And that's coming from completely fresh eyes. I'd never seen it before, so.
It's very watchable, and there's a lot to like. Like what
There's
it
a
does,
lot to like, even though
Yeah.
the story's a mess. It was interesting rewatching it after seeing the Villeneuve version, because the Villeneuve version makes more sense. Like, I understood the story more.
you
So then going
kinda
back and watching the Lynch one, I was like, okay, I kind of get it now, even though
Yeah.
the movie itself doesn't do a good job of explaining anything.
Although it certainly does a lot of explaining.
It does a lot of explaining, and it's still more confusing as a movie.
It's like, someone's not getting a point you're making, so you just like talk louder and more. It's like they're not getting it. No.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you.
But there was a 3-hour TV cut that Dino De Laurentiis did without David Lynch at all being involved.
That's the one that's credited to Alan Smithy, right?
Yeah, he wanted his name taken off that. But there is a fan edit that apparently is really good that kind of took both versions and sort of rejig the edit and stuff. And I think it might be online somewhere. I haven't checked that out. I don't know if I want to.
What if it's just another 45 minutes of a half-naked Sting wandering around with his chest puffed out?
Incest orgy.
That's the thing is both versions do a great job of making this world just feel scary.
For sure, yeah.
The Lynch one, you can say some of it's kind of dated and goofy, but it's still like, it's such a like dark, creepy world.
It's like a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's like,
which goes along with all of his other movies.
even all those like kind of, it looks like cubicle rooms. You know, you kind of see above those rooms that Baron Harkonnen's in, and there's just like hundreds of them, and they feel like kind of like prison cells or something.
Yeah.
Like, oh God. And they just do these experiments on people. It's gross.
And then the Villeneuve version, because I've heard people say it's like a, I don't know, like an adult Star Wars or something.
Yeah.
And I can kind of see that, but it really, yeah, the way it sets up the kind of the warring factions, and it just does a great job of making it feel believable.
Yeah, for
in this
sure.
kind of grand scale.
I've heard like kind of Game of Thrones in space might be
Okay.
better because they have the different houses and like kind of how they're all kind of fighting for power and blah blah blah. So I don't know, another way of thinking about it, I think. But Star Wars is like, no.
I think that's just everybody's go-to.
Yeah, that's.
It's
like,
interesting with the because the Lynch version came out, at the height of Star Wars, and it's such a different movie, but they still tried to make like toys, like little,
They did, yeah,
little
I saw
action
those.
figures. So it's like, what kid is going to want to play with Baron Fartbag? Like,
I'm Baron Harkonnen. I'm gonna pull your heart plug. I'm milking a cat.
one of the toys, I don't know if it was one that actually was produced or a prototype for one that they didn't end up making, came with that cat.
No.
Yeah, that's not a joke.
No.
It's in the recent Arrow video release.
No.
There's a little featurette about it, yeah. But needless to say, the toy line did not go over well because
Yeah.
what little kid watches that movie and wants to play with toys from it?
It was like, I remember when Blade Runner came out and they were saying, people were comparing it to Star Wars. I'm like, no.
I think it's just anything like sci-fi,
Sci-fi, yeah.
with great effects for the time.
Yeah.
It's just like Star Wars.
Yeah.
No, the David Lynch Dune feels like nothing else from that era.